Welcome back to the San Diego Opera Podcast. I'm Nick Reveles, and my guest today is the director of Maria de Buenos Aires, John de los Santos. John, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Good to have you here. So let's get right into it. One of the things that's just immediately accessible about this piece is the music, because it's so infectious and so melodic. The language is a whole other issue, right. Because it is poetry.
Yes.
And it's in Spanish, but it's not Spanish. It's not Mexican Spanish. It's not Madrid Spanish.
Right.
It's Argentinian, so the meanings are totally different. How do you make sense of it all and tell a story?
Yeah, the libretto is by the poet Horacio Ferrer, and it's in a Argentine slang from the 60s, so it's even further removed from what we may think of if we study Spanish today.
So even Argentine people today might not get.
Yeah, there will be a couple
all
of couple of references and phrases here and there that have fallen into disuse today. But I think that the main thing about this piece is that the poetry is a starting point. It's a jumping off point, but it doesn't have to be followed literally every single line. It's impossible. There are so many things in it that are just out of his imagination that you could never stage. And Piazzolla did a really excellent job of creating mood from phrases of everything, but he doesn't adhere to every single word all the time.
Ah, that's interesting. So it's not like, a narrative opera like Don Giovanni or Il Trovatore, where we can sort of follow every word and make sense of it. This is a whole different
This is a whole different thing. Some people have said that this really isn't an opera at all. It's more like a song cycle. Piazzolla called it his operita, his little opera. And I think that what I've tried to do is to take these 17 songs and string together a narrative through it that will not only make sense to the audience, but also hopefully tell a story that's evocative of the period. We're doing it in the period of 1968 when it premiered, and also evoke sympathy for the characters. A lot of times this piece is presented in concert or as just symbols of ideas of this era, and I want to really create real people that the audience can emulate with and identify with by the end.
Now, essentially, it's the story of Maria.
Right.
And her arc. Generally speaking, or maybe simply speaking, what is that arc?
In this version, essentially, she is a woman who was born on the outskirts of Buenos Aires into an abusive and impoverished family. She seeks out Buenos Aires proper as a way of escape. But when she arrives there, she discovers a multitude of characters who she learns aren't always what they seem, and discovers a lot of the underbelly of the city, the prostitution, the drugs, the gambling, things like that that are the polar opposite of what she was looking for.
Yeah, so she hasn't really escaped.
Right, yeah, it's just gone to a deeper level.
Yeah.
She does find love there, she does find hope there in unlikely places, and at the end of the opera, in this version, she ultimately does triumph, but it's not by riding off into the sunset. It takes a darker turn, but I hope that it does end on a more uplifting note.
Now, you're working with two singers, Audrey Babcock and Paul LaRosa, who are opera singers. I mean, Audrey, for the most part, sings Carmen, and Paul, I just interviewed him yesterday. He's out there singing, Verdi and Puccini and Donizetti. Do you have to approach these guys a little differently when it comes to a tango opera, because the style is somewhat different from your traditional opera?
I mean, I do, in the sense that they're going to be mic'd. It's stipulated in the score that the singers should be amplified. So it's not because they're not loud enough, it's just what the composer requested.
Right.
So because of that, they're able to take things vocally at a little bit of a lower level in places, so it will have a much more intimate and almost cabaret feel in a way, which is very evocative of the tango. So it's not always going to be this forte, loud, declarative singing. Sometimes it can be very intimate and almost whispered, very, very piano. So that's something that they've had to learn and deal with. And also the tango rhythms are all different. There's a lot of freedom within the phrases for them to play with the notes.
It's interesting. I was talking to Paul after our interview, and he said, looking at the score, Piazzolla evidently wrote the first verse of one of the songs out and put a syllable to a note, and then it's just sort of free. It's up to the performer to decide how to fit the words of the next verse to the
It's
the
similar
music.
to Baroque and bel canto. You know, you would have the melody line and the first phrase set out, but then there's freedom to ornament and make it your own. And so that's one of the great things about this, is that I really want to work with the singers to create their own ornamentation and versions based on the emotions that we're conveying within each song.
Tell us a little bit about the costumes and the sets. What are we going to expect?
Well, our set designer and I have basically come up with the artist Antonio Berni, who was an Argentine painter and collage maker and muralist. And so we've taken a lot of inspiration from his work and gone in a graffiti style. He did graffiti all over the city. And
Interesting. It's sort of an Argentine Banksy.
Yeah, totally. And would use bits of garbage to create these murals and everything. So the set's going to be a series of panels that rotate, and every way that they rotate has a different style of graffiti on it.
Sounds like it would fit the text really well.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the period. That's
Absolutely,
great.
yeah. And there's a staircase. There's all kinds of small moving areas within the set, but we want it to really be about light and space, because at the end of the day, people are coming to see this for the tango, and so we have to have lots of room. And the great thing about the Lyceum is that it's in a thrust, so we don't have to just do it flat. We can actually play with all kinds of angles and show backs and all kinds of different angles of the body. The costumes are all going to be basically from the 60s and 50s as well, because since these are peasants, a lot of the clothes they'll be wearing are leftovers from the earlier generation. So you'll see bits of 50s and 40s in the clothes. So it's not just this isn't like a hippie show, but it's a combination of those eras.
Right, fascinating. And what about, you're a choreographer.
Right.
What about the dance? What about tango? How are you weaving that in?
Yeah, I mean, there are several sections in the piece that are just basically dance numbers without any singing or text at all. And there is dance in those. There's dance in some of the singing moments. I've tried to really only use the tango dance when it tells the story. Every tango that happens in this production occurs within the construct of a situation. They don't just tango because there's music there. For example, the very first time Maria tangos, it's because she climbs out of the window of her current lover and sees a man in the streets and is lured by him to dance, and then she leaves her lover as a result. So there's always a context to the tangos, but it's been a lot of fun to work with the singers and the ballet dancers we've hired who have not tangoed in a very long time, and to create a style that is not so much dancing with the stars or so you think you can dance. It's the tango of the streets. It's the kind that everyone is able to do and have been doing in this part of the world.
And where it started.
Absolutely.
Right, in the Porteña, the port area, the barrios of that area, the lower class. It's the thing that's the more I studied this piece and the more I delved into tango and its history and its roots and origins, nobody agrees about anything.
It adds to the mystery.
It's impossible to pinpoint exactly how it started and where it came from, which is very cool. I mean,
Sure.
it is very mysterious.
Absolutely. And I've tried to really explore the root of tango in the sense that some people think that it began between two men because the population was in balance. There were so many more men than women, and the men would tango together in order to lure women to get with. And that's part of the show. But we also have female and female tango when we have prostitutes dancing together. And then we have several male-female couples. So there's a combination for everybody in this production.
When I came across that information and put it together with the fact that the bordello was the place where tango seems to have, at least according to some students of tango, seems to be where tango was located at first, and that it was the men who were dancing. These are the Johns, waiting for the next pro,
Absolutely.
to be free.
Yeah.
And then I suppose whoever wins the tango dance gets the one.
Yeah, and that happens in this production.
That's spectacular.
But the thing too is that men could practice with each other to get better so they wouldn't embarrass themselves in front of a woman who maybe said, "Oh, you're not the best dancer ever. I think I'm going to go with Harry over there instead of with you." So it was a way of honing their skills. And our ballet dancers are twin brothers. And so they dance together for the charms of a woman who passes by at one point. So,
fun. Well, we're all really looking forward to this. Thanks so much for being here and sharing a little information about it.
Absolutely. Thank you
See
so
you
much.
soon.
You
Okay.
too. All right.
Yo soy María de Buenos Aires, de Buenos Aires, María, no ven quién soy yo. María tango, María del arrabal, María noche, María pasión fatal, María del amor, de Buenos Aires soy yo.